Dr. Kaufmann is president of PWPA, Professors World Peace Academy USA, editor-in-chief of the New World Encyclopedia, which is an online resource, and board chairman and president of the Interreligious Federation for World Peace. He teaches at New York area universities and graduate schools, and is an educator and consultant for religion and spirituality for people of all ages. Young people love to hear him speak, so I think you guys are going to really love to hear him speak. And older folks too, but no older folks came here today. And for religion and spirituality for several global youth organizations and diverse organizations. Frank is the recipient of numerous international peace awards and academic awards. And Dr. Kaufmann will be speaking to us on Reverend Moon's influence on religion in the 20th and 21st century. So please welcome with me Dr. Frank Kaufmann.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hendricks, and thanks everyone for coming here this afternoon. I'm going to wait for the tech to resolve itself. If you have a phone that makes noise and you feel like checking and making it not do that, that would be great. All right, look at that, look at that. It's kind of like, remember when you were little, you'd put like a little piece of paper in the water and then it would become a picture or something like that. Okay. All right, very good. I'm passionate about this subject. I'm obsessive about it. I could talk for days and years about it and never take a breath. But I have 15 minutes. And I would, Dr. Hendricks, just stop me cold, and that'll be the last word. I'm not going to beg for more time. I'll try to manage and get through what I have prepared, and it goes like this mostly. Any of us who have been to unification things, I think, tend to hear long lists of how great we are and how much we've done and how famous are the people who hang with us. That might be true, but I think eventually, if I was a non-unification person hearing or meeting unification people, at a certain point you'd say, okay, I get it. Okay, you've done a lot of stuff. Well done, thank you. And you gather a lot of famous people. Well done. What I wanted to do with my paper is to try to tap into what I believe is the wellspring of why that's the case, rather than try to convince you or persuade you that we've gotten a lot of stuff done. What I committed myself to in the creation of this paper was to try to identify what it is about Sun Myung Moon that resulted in him what? Yeah? Thank you. Okay. That resulted in him being able to do this. Okay. So here we go then. Reverend Moon is above all a religious individual. He claims to have had a particular experience with God. He claims to have a particular significance and important spirituality, and I argue that this spirituality is that which has generated this unimaginable abundance of outcome and results, the likes of which we are experiencing here this week. So since it is his spirituality, or it is him as a religious individual that is the wellspring of the types of unimaginable things like we're witnessing this week, I created in my paper an account of what that is, very briefly. Where do I point this? Okay, here we are. I don't know if that's legible, but my point is that one can't just say Reverend Moon is a very spiritual guy. I want to introduce the particular dimensions of his spirituality. Most people who have made an effort to understand him biographically is familiar with his prayer on Easter, on the Easter Eve when he was 16, or in the year he turned 16, on Easter Eve. He was desperate in prayer, and he had an experience of Jesus appearing to him and commissioning him in his life's work. What he describes in his autobiography, the nature of that prayer is that human suffering he was inconsolable over the fact of human suffering, and he was demanding of God, not demanding or beseeching God, to ask God, why doesn't God do something about this issue? It was that prayer. It was the context of Jesus appearing to him and commissioning him. And so the other thing to know about Reverend Moon's spirituality is that it was driven by pain over human suffering. That's identical to Siddhartha Gautama. That's how Buddhism began. Pain over human suffering. And the whole of Buddhism is nothing other than to address the end of human suffering. The other thing was that Reverend Moon prayed in a Christian manner. So world affairs and history results in this particular kid pained by human suffering, ends up a Christian praying type of individual. He gets his communication from God through Christ, and the response of that is he spends 9 years in personal investigation into the spiritual world, into the natural world, and into biblical scriptures. So the roots of what he put together as the framework of everything he's done since grows out of research into nature, the spiritual world, and Christian scriptures, or Jewish and Christian scriptures, the Bible. So he could have taken his experience with Jesus and just preached Jesus. I've met the risen Lord Jesus Christ, and I believe you can also, if you get on your knees and pray as I've prayed. But that wasn't what he did. He went and spent 9 years in research to try to gain the framework of how he would implement the promise he made to Jesus on that night. So I have in slide number 5 that his religious life is a circle. His nature attracted God. Human suffering was unbearable for him. God found in that an interesting person. He then responds to God by taking responsibility of finding out how things work, how they were built, what went wrong, how they're fixed. So it's a cycle of he brings himself to God, God brings himself to him, he responds responsibly. The more he tries to gain and acquire the type of information and knowledge that would make him carry out God's will, in turn gets God's response. So for people who regard him as unique in history, or the Messiah, or however you want to call him, it's important to recognize that we're dealing with a spirituality that is revolving, that is not one-sided or another. It's human and it's divine. And that is the roots of what we're experiencing here this week. Once at the end of his 9 years, of prayer and research and study, he produced an entire systematic thought. It's called the Divine Principle, and that became the foundation of his impact, the beginning of how he impacted religious life. How am I doing, Dr. Hendricks? All right, thanks. Okay. All right. So in my paper, I hope you do take time to read it, maybe on the plane. 7, beautiful. Okay, now I'm rich. I'm richer than I was a minute ago. I just used it up. Okay. The influence on the spiritual world had 3 manifestations. He founded his own religious community. That impacted the history of religion. Unification people and their families are doing something to the history of religion just by being religious in unification ways. The other thing he did was he founded numerous Christian theological associations, multi-religious associations that are theological, academic, and scholarly in nature. And the third thing he did was created interfaith activist peace organizations. So that spirituality that I described in the first slide produced 3 arenas where he impacted the religious world and religious history. The first one, creating a community of faith, had these elements in it. He wrote a complete theology, an account of all of reality, from the beginning of time to the end of time, from the spiritual world to the physical world, from being a baby to being a grandpa. There is nothing in any part of reality that he doesn't seek to account for in the theology he created, the divine principle. Then he created a growing religious community. The third thing was a multi-religious theological institutions, and finally activist interfaith organizations. The growing community, the unification community, has the divine principle as its scripture and text. It has the blessing as its core sacrament. Let me read about the blessing. It's the means by which God enters into eternal participation and commits to intimacy and protective care over the love and lineage of families that are moved to receive the blessing. The sacrament of unification purports to mean that God is within your couple and your couple's love, and God is within your procreative capacity and activity. Your lineage is as saved, your couple is as saved as you, your lineage is as saved as your couple. And that's what makes the blessing an interesting sacrament, and that's what makes the unification community interesting in the history of religion. He created a church, and he made an ecclesiology, that's the fancy word for how to run a church properly, that accurately built on the principle. There's nothing that he does that is not a faithful and accurate extension of the principle itself. This is an important part to understand, about his own community, and also about any of the organizations, the multi-faith organizations that he founded. And finally, their missions, he created missions. So what I say about these communities is this. As these families grow, and as their children grow and raise families of their own, which is happening in abundance. We just heard from Sunjin Moon, who, she's like 40 years old. She's the daughter, she's one of the kids, one of the kids. And she has children who are getting married. Other members of her family have children also getting married. So this is, as the community grows, unification culture traditions will impact society, culture, schools, universities, media. This should become the subject of academic inquiry. Okay. The second thing that Father Moon created was multi-religious theological institutions. Okay. Most people, even unification people, think that this was something that Father Moon also did. He has a church, he's a church leader, he blesses people, he's the Messiah for them. But in addition to that, he was a great guy because he argued that religions should get along. What I say in my paper, and I do hope you read it, is that he didn't also create interfaith organizations. The divine principle itself is an account of reality in which the only thing you can do is create interfaith organizations. Interfaith organizations and multi-faith theological societies are within the divine principle. So you can read what I wrote. By its very nature, the principle by its very nature must found itself in multi-religious theological institutions. These include the Unification Theological Seminary. The first faculty did not have a unification member in it. It had a Methodist, it had a Dutch Reformed, it had a Jewish rabbi. His seminary, his own seminary, and his contemporaries said, "You're crazy. You're going to have no members by the time they graduate. They'll all become members of other religions." It didn't bother him at all, and here they sit. One is your moderator right there. He created Christian ecumenical conferences, and these are the New Ecumenical Research Association, conferences on God, the contemporary discussion, and a book series on the God series. The God series produced 10 volumes in what might be argued as the darkest time of theology. The darkest time of theology. It was the rise of the death of God theology and the rise of deconstruction, in which referential language was being undermined by the intellectual community of the West. And he produced a theological community that regained the ascendancy of a constructive and affirmative positive God writing that redesigned the Western Theological Academy. It's a little known reality of his contribution. Oh, my time is up. Okay, then. I promised that I wouldn't do this, but I will just do the last thing, okay? Yeah, I promised I wouldn't. Sorry, thanks. I would have appreciated a warning. Okay, so that was the theological, and then finally, he created a great number of multi-faith activist peace organizations. So this is the one I didn't get to develop, but I hope some of what I was able to communicate is helpful to give you a better understanding of the roots and the animating impetus of what Father Moon has done to the religious world in the contemporary time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.